Welcome to our virtual artist talk for our current exhibition, A River Flows Through Us. My name is Ralph Wall, and I am joined by Pat Krywy, one of the featured artists in the exhibition. So Pat, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I can tell you that I'm quite chuffed to be part of the exhibition. It was kind of originally presented to us as emerging artists. So I'm very happy to be considered part of that that genre, which is nice. This is my first exhibition, kind of a formal exhibition in a formal gallery setting. So it's been a big deal for me. I live here in the region. I'm a resident of Cambridge, and I have lived in close proximity to the Speed and the Grand Rivers for many, many years, as have several generations of my family as well. So it's the river's been kind of a constant in our lives here for many years, and I've been always amazed by the various personalities that the river has, and also the built environment around the rivers as well. So that has always been of interest to me over the years.
Cool. Okay, so you touched on all about the river and everything. Is there anything else that you could tell what inspired this exhibition?
Because of my design background, I work as an interior designer. I've always had a love of art and architecture and design all of my life. So it's always been, in addition to the various complexities that the river has kind of in the landscape, I've always been intrigued by the built environment around the rivers. And I guess I'm drawn by the history, whether those buildings are more humble and they were early houses or farms, or they are the mills, the industrial areas that built up around the river to indicate the prosperity that the rivers brought to the region, to the area. I'm drawn by the textures, and I'm drawn to the shapes and the various details in the architecture along the way. I think that speaks to my design background and my design work. I'm really drawn to those things, and also to the history and the way those different design elements represent the history and the character and the personality that they bring to me and to the viewers and to the region. I was also really intrigued by, again, how all those different elements in the built environment, when they're located in such close proximity to the rivers, how they reflect into the rivers as well, and how those reflections change over time and play with our view of what those buildings are, and kind of the conversation that the buildings and the reflections that they make into the river have. So I was very conscious of that as well, and wanted to try to portray that. I
can definitely see that in your work. Oh, it's great. Can you tell us a little bit about your artistic process and the techniques that you used?
I think for me, I'm an urban sketcher for the most part. So I'm always setting up, my process is usually fairly simple if I'm doing something on site. It's a matter of getting out the camp stool and finding the right view and the right scene, whether that scene would be something on a larger scale, or whether it would be zeroing in on some interesting detail or several details. Once I've found that, I'm good to go. And I work primarily in pencil and ink and watercolor. Those are my three mediums. When I was kind of getting back into sketching and art making about 6 years ago, my process was a little longer because I was always laying down a good pencil sketch first of whatever the scene was that I was trying to portray. And once I got the pencil sketch in, then I went back in with my ink and basically did the sketch again, but in ink, and then highlighted it with watercolor. I've always been a lover of making lines. I love to make marks, and the marks would have been ink marks. So that was always the biggest part of my process, was the ink. Over these past 6 years or so that I've been back into my art, I've gained a little bit more confidence and a little bit more speed. And now quite often, if I'm working on site, the pencil has fallen by the wayside and we really just go into ink and watercolor. I am experimenting a little bit with laying down the watercolor first now, and then going back in with the ink to try to pull out different highlights. So that's a much different look for me. It's much looser. I'm working on that. I can't say it's still my comfort level, but we're getting there. But primarily it's relatively simple on site. If I'm working in my studio, if I'm doing a commission or work, some of the pieces from the show were done in my studio as opposed to being done on site. A little bit more time taken, but if I'm on site, you know, an hour's worth of time or 2 hours worth of time, perhaps, to lay down a decent piece.
Nice. So when did you first become interested in this type of artwork, like the ink and the wash?
I've always been interested in ink. I've always loved working in ink, all the way through university, through college. In my business, I do drafting, still by hand. So certainly doing line work and working with ink has always been something that I've done. So it feels very natural to me. Getting back into the art world and kind of creating art that's not necessarily associated with my working life, that happened about 6 years ago or so, when I kind of discovered the urban sketching, worldwide urban sketching phenomenon. And it's a kind of blossomed from there. What else can I say about that? Yeah, so again, it's been an interest for a good part of my life because I've always worked in ink, but getting back into it again more seriously from an art perspective, that was about 6 years ago.
Cool.
And the watercolor has been something that I have been adding in over the past few years. I wasn't necessarily comfortable doing watercolor, and you know, not having the control over the medium the way I have control over the ink, but I have gotten used to that. I've made peace with that, and now watercolor is part of my work as well.
Nice. Yeah, I can totally relate. I merged the two because I was big into ink drawing and watercolor. And then I think for me, it was the Calvin and Hobbes covers from back in the 80s and 90s from Bill Watterson.
Okay.
I was inspired by that, and then I started doing my own versions of that. So very similar. So nice.
So can I ask you a question? What's your approach? Ink first and then wash, or wash first and then ink?
Always ink first and then wash. Mostly because I find once you put the watercolor down, it changes the texture of the paper, and I find that it's a little harder to apply the ink.
I've been having a challenging time trying to find the right papers. So that's a little bit of a trial and error right now as well. Because I do kind of like the effect of, you know, watercolor first, then ink. But as you say, it's trying to find the right texture, because I don't want the ink to be destroyed by the paper. I don't want the paper to determine what the ink looks like.
Yeah.
I want that line to still have some flow. So.
Yeah, I tend to do more rough paper for my watercolor. So if I'm doing ink, I tend not to use the micron pens or stuff. I'll apply it more either with a brush or a bamboo stick, and then I'll get more free flowing ink.
Yes. Okay. All right.
So
very good. I'll keep that in mind. I've tried the bamboo stick in the past, and I should try that again. And at batch, I've actually done it with matches as well.
Yeah.
To apply the ink with matches.
Yeah, for me, it gives it, because I do primarily landscapes, it's a more organic look. Where I don't know if you're doing urban sketching, you want a little bit more control, probably.
Yeah, and it varies if it's something that's going to be a detail piece, like a detail of an architectural element.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might want that to be a little bit crisper. So certainly then I'm back to my micron pens, and I want to be a bit more precise.
Yeah.
And try to capture it more realistically, I guess.
Yeah, and then in that case, you probably want to use more of the hot press paper as opposed to the cold press paper, so you get more nice smooth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. So what's next for you? Do you have any other body of work in progress?
I don't have a body of work in progress at the moment, but there has been an idea floating in my mind for a little bit. The area of Cambridge that I live in, which is the Preston part of town. We have some, and I'm a few blocks away from kind of one of the oldest areas of settlement in Preston. There's some gorgeous homes there, big, small. There have been a number of industries in that area as well. The mill picture that I have in the current exhibition is kind of part of that same area along the Speed River. That area is, again, has been around as long as I've been around, and way longer than me. Very impressive for the detailing in that area. And that is the area that is probably going to be going under a lot of redevelopment over the next decade as the LRT comes through. And there will be some major changes within that area, which is certainly its progress. It's sad in many ways because we'll lose some of the oldest structures in town. And I feel a compulsion to try to track those buildings and the details that are there, and the history that's been there for so many years. So that is a concept for perhaps another show that I would like to start working on. Again, as those buildings are still intact, and while they remain there, to try to capture them and record them for history, perhaps for our Preston history.
That'd be pretty cool. Okay, where can people learn more about you and your work?
Well, as I said at the beginning, I was sort of considered an emerging artist. So I am working on developing my practice. Currently, I am working on a website and some entrance into the Instagram world. So that is in progress right now. So I'm hoping over the next few months, I will have a website set up. I do have my pieces for sale at a lovely gallery shop in downtown Cambridge called No Words. And it's located on Ainslie Street, close to Dixon Street. And I've had my work there for a few years and continue to have work there. And people are always welcome to stop by to purchase or to perhaps be in touch with the proprietor, Donna Jelinas, if they're trying to get in touch with me. For the duration of the show, my CV also does have some contact information. So someone can always contact me through my business, and that would be Pat at 5greenapples.ca. And I would be more than happy to bring them up to date, or if they're interested in purchasing something or commissioning something, you can always keep in touch that way. But stay tuned. We will have a website up in a little while.